Okay, guys, so I'm going to do adding, taking away, multiplying and dividing in this video. So, upper and lower bounds. So if I said a equals 4.8 rounded to the nearest, so rounded to one decimal place, and I said b equals 2.75 rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, so they could ask you in the exam, they could say, what is the upper bound answer of this when I add a and b together? And what is the lower bound answer of this? Right, now we've got to think logically here. To get the upper bound answer, that means we want to get the biggest possible answer we can. Now, if 4.8 has been rounded to one decimal place, to make our life easier here, we basically want to write out what the upper and the lower bound is of 4.8. So, the upper bound of 4.8 rounded to one decimal place from the last video, you should know, is 4.85, and the lower bound would be 4.75. And for 2.75, when rounded to 2 decimal places, the upper bound is going to be 2.755, and the lower bound is going to be 2.745. Okay, so if you're struggling with that, guys, please watch the first video again. Okay, now our objective here is to do a plus b. That's that plus that. But we want an upper bound answer. That means the biggest possible answer. So logically, when you're adding, to get the biggest possible answer, you need to have the biggest that 4.8 could be, which is 4.85, and you want to add it to the biggest b would be, which is 4.755, the upper bound of that. So to get the upper bound, when you add them, it would be upper bound plus upper bound, because that's going to be your two biggest answers added together will get your biggest answer. So in this case, 4.85 plus 2.755, 2.755. So let me just use my calculator for that. 4.85 plus 2.755 is 7.605. So that's the biggest possible answer that could be. Now, if I wanted to find the lower bound answer when I add those two together, to find the lowest possible answer when I add together, I would have to pick the two lowest numbers, obviously. So it would be the lower bound plus the lower bound. In this case, it would be 4.75 plus 2.745. So 4.75 plus 2.745 equals 7.495. So therefore, as you can see here, that is a bigger answer than that, as we knew it was going to be anyway, because that's the upper bound answer to lower bound answer. So when you're adding together, it's fairly straightforward. However, when you subtract it, it's different. Now, let me just, for time's sake, use these same numbers here, okay? Upper bound, so a minus b is what we want to go for here, and lower bound. Okay, it is not as simple as adding is. Because adding, the two biggest numbers added together is going to give you the biggest answer. That's fine, we all know that. When you subtract, though, it's different. If I did the biggest answer for A minus the biggest answer for B, that wouldn't give me the biggest answer overall. If I said to you, just pick random numbers here, if I said 10 minus 3, that equals 7. If I said 10 minus 4, that equals 6. If I said 10 minus 2, that equals 8. The biggest answer we have here is here, and that's when you do 10 minus the smallest part here. So when you want to get the upper bound answer of A minus B, you want to find the upper bound of A, so you get the biggest possible version of A, but you want to take that away from the smallest possible version of B, because that would give you the biggest answer overall. So in this case, upper bound of A is 4.85, and the lower bound of B is 2.745. So when I take that away from each other, 4.85 minus 2.745 2.745, I get 2.105. Right, that's the biggest possible answer it could be. Now we're going to compare that to this answer in a second. Now to find the lower bound, that is basically me saying I want to find the smallest answer I can from doing A minus B. So to get the smallest answer I can, I want the smallest version of A, and I want to take that away from the biggest version of B, because that would be the smallest difference between the two of them. So it would be the smallest version of A, take that away from the biggest version of B. So the lower bound of A is 4.75, and the upper bound of B is 2.755. So 4.75 take away 2.755 is 1.995. And as you can see, that is a much smaller answer than that, because that's the lower bound answer. Okay? Now this layout I've done here is exactly what it's going to be for multiplying and dividing as well. And hopefully a few of you will be able to have made that connection already. So let's say I've got times here and I've got divide here. Let's pick the exact same answers, yeah? So 4.8 rounded to one decimal place. So the upper bound is 4.85. The lower bound is 4.75. And we've also got 2.75, which is B. And we agreed the upper bound was 2.755 and the lower bound was 2.745. Right, I want to do A times B. Now we agreed here, the upper bound, when you add, is the two biggest numbers added together. The exact same thing when multiplying. Obviously, to get the biggest answer you want the biggest A and the biggest B. So therefore, it'll be upper bound times upper bound, which is 4.85 times by 2.755. So 4.85 times by 2.755 is an ugly number, 13.36175. The lower bound, you want the two smallest answers you can get, obviously. So therefore, we want the lower bound times the lower bound, which is 4.75 times by 2.745. So 4.75 times 2.745 is 13.03875. And as you can see, that's a smaller answer than that, obviously. Now, dividing is the same process as subtracting. If I had 10 divided by 5 and 10 divided by 2, 10 divided by 5, the answer is 2. 10 divided by 2, the answer is 5. So when I divide by a smaller number, more goes into it, therefore my answer is bigger. And that's why when I do A divided by B, to get my upper bound answer and my lower bound answer, it's not as easy as it is for adding and multiplying. Upper bound, I'd want the biggest version of A I can get and divide it by the smallest version of B, because that would give me the most amount of times it can fit in. So the upper bound, as we said here, was 4.85, and the lower bound of that was 2.745. So therefore, 4.85 divided by 2.745 is ridiculous number, 17668. We'll go for that. And the lower bound, as we discussed with subtraction, we want the lower bound of A, so that's as small as it can be, divided by the biggest version of B, because that means it goes in less times. So therefore, we've got 4.75 divided by the upper bound, which is 2.755. So 4.75 divided by 2.755 is 1.7241, etc., etc. As you can see, that is a smaller answer than that. So therefore, that makes sense. That's the lower bound, that's the upper bound. So guys, look through these examples here, and best of luck with the questions. I'm sure you'll be fine.